Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hello, readers, and thank you for joining me today for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast, as I have a very special guest who is totally making waves in the romance genre, not only as a USA Today bestselling author with over, 1 million copies of her work sold, but she's also a powerhouse on the publishing side, and I cannot wait to hear more about that. So welcome, Jenny Hale, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm super excited to talk with you today again about your work and also the publishing house. But I figured to kick us off, I know that you just released a brand new book that's already a bestseller called The Noel Bridge. So can we dive into that and you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, The Noel Bridge is a story about a girl named Alicia Silver who has lost her fiance, and she's trying to manage the first year without him, and it's Christmas. And she's a nurse. She's been working and just throwing herself into work, and the people at work are sort of noticing. Her boss is like, "You're exhausted. Like, you need to go home and just relax." But when she goes home, she's living in the condo that she and her fiance bought together, and she was living there and decorating it and getting it ready, and then they were going to get married and move in together. So she doesn't really want to not work, but she's just sort of overwhelmed by all of it. So when she's at home, the book opens with her in this condo at home, trying to figure out what she's going to do for her Christmas break. And she sees a newscast about a bridge in a small fictional town called Noel, Tennessee. And she's actually from Noel, Tennessee. So she knows about the bridge. And so it catches her eye immediately. And at the beginning of the book, she discloses that when she was a little kid, her dad got transferred to another town. And she ran to that bridge and she prayed under that bridge and wished to please stay in Noel. And she didn't. The moving truck took them all away. And so she already is sort of like, whatever, this bridge is not really what it's, cracked up to be. But as she's sitting there in her grief, hearing story after story about these people they're interviewing who have had their wishes granted, she can't help but think, maybe, just maybe, I could hear from my fiance if I go back there, because I know all about it and I know how to get back there. So she gets the last ticket to Noel and heads out there. And when she gets there, she isn't expecting to meet Leo Whitaker, who is relatively new to the town. He owns the diner. He's restored the diner in this small town, and he lives with his father. And he actually moved to Noel because he was trying to give his father a small town place to live, because his father has early onset dementia. And so when she gets there, Leo is also wishing under the bridge because his father is missing. He took a walk and they don't know where he is. So the story is about the two of them who don't know each other from Adam, who both have major life events going on, and how they manage, and whether or not the bridge really is a thing or not. So that's sort of a big question mark until the end.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Gosh, so how did this idea even come about? Because there's so much to it, like you said, from both characters.
I think this one was book 25. So by the time I've written 25 books, they're the weirdest. It's not a gorgeous epiphany of a, moment. I was in Indianapolis talking to my distributor who distributes the trade titles for Harpeth Road Press, my publishing company. And we were talking about just a general discussion about book sales. And he had worked in the romance genre at one point, and he said, I used to sell books, and he was throwing out ideas, and he said, cover bridges on the cover, and he was talking about cover design. And that was he's in Indianapolis. I'd had to drive back to Nashville, where I'm from. And so by the time I drove back to Nashville, I had this seed of an idea of a cover bridge book because I thought I haven't read a cover bridge book. That might be kind of fun to
Yeah.
write. Yeah. So that's sort of how it came about. And then the whole story just sort of unfolded in my imagination. But it all started with that cover design idea.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, and I imagine too, like the holidays is such a hard time for somebody going through grief, So I don't know if you've tackled that heavy topic in one of your other 24 books, but what made you want to tackle that in this book?
I think in all of my books, I write very light, relaxing fiction, romance fiction. But I want there to be an element of reality to it
Mm-hmm.
that makes people say, I know what that's all about. I know somebody or I myself have gone through something like that. And then to sort of spin it in a way that hopefully makes them think that things can be okay. If they can work through it or if they can have enough faith, eventually, I always think about that little phrase, this too shall pass, and again, I'm not making light of any kind of death because that's a major life event and it doesn't pass, but we are built to move forward with it. Even if we carry it with us, we're built to move on. So I just think that I always try to challenge myself and putting something like that in the holidays and trying to make it a festive book. It's just, it was book 25. Let's give it a whirl and see if I can.
But I love that you have that string of then hope in this book, in all of your books that really come out then in your romance, which I love. Yeah. And then it sound like this too also has a little suspense to it then, given like, where's the dad? Are we gonna find him?
Yes, yes. I mean, I love little mysteries in my books. In my last probably 8 to 10 books, I've had a little mystery of some sort because I feel like that's just an added little element. And I don't know, it just comes to me when I'm writing. But not all of my books have that, but many of them do because it just makes for that page turner because you just want to know what's going to happen with this person.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I have to ask then, do you think this one's gonna be made into a Hallmark movie for you?
I don't know. We pitch them. We pitch them. Harpeth Road is pitching. We pitch all of our books to many different people, and Hallmark has an agent that we pitch to regularly. So she has it. We'll see what they
Yeah.
say. I mean, I know, it's the same way with acquisitions as a publisher that I'm seeing now. It's so difficult. There are so many moving parts to making it into a movie, that you're like, okay, what's their list look like? What are they looking for in terms of rounding out their list that season? What producers do they feel could get on board for that? There's so many different
Gotcha.
conversations to make it happen that, I get it if they pass. But yeah, they definitely are aware. I make sure of
Right.
that.
Well, it must get so surreal to not have one but two books already, made into Hallmark movies. So, what did those just happen to just come about, or what was that experience like?
Yeah, well, the first one that was ever made into a Hallmark movie was my very first novel. So that was, I mean, where do you go from there?
Yeah.
So that was crazy and interesting. I mean, by the time it actually came to film, I had a few more books out, but originally that was the first book I'd ever written. So I was I was an elementary school teacher for 18 years. I was a district level educator, public school teacher. I have the reading specialist endorsement, Masters of Ed, and ESL endorsement. And I was teaching ESL. And all this was going on in my regular life. And then I wrote this book. Who knows why? I still don't know what possessed me to say I'm going to just write a whole book all the way to the end. And it sort of took on a life of its own. And then, for about 3 years, I did both. But when Hallmark came, I kept waiting for people to understand, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm not professional, anything in this realm, anything at that time. And it was a cool learning experience to just know that really your creativity it doesn't have to be, it's not like a job skill. Yes, we hone our skills and we sharpen them, but the general creativity, the idea that they needed to make that movie was already there. So it didn't matter if I had a million books or no books.
Right.
And so that was a fun sort of entry into the realm of movie making.
Yeah, and what a start to like where you are now. That's pretty amazing. But so the Noel Bridge, it's not your first holiday themed romance book. How did you come to be known as like the go-to author for holiday romance books? Do you just love writing about the season, or tell me more
Well,
about that?
it's twofold. So to begin with, my first novel, Coming Home for Christmas, that went on to Hallmark, that one was set at Christmas time. I didn't really plan it. It just kind of, that's what came out of my brain when I wrote a book that I never thought would publish ever in my life. And so, and we did sort of up the ante once we got under contract and really made it Christmas. It just kind of was set there before, when I first wrote it. I got married at Christmas time. I had a Christmas wedding. So I think that it's my favorite season and holiday. But I think that probably lends itself to it. But then once you get under contract, my first book was a Christmas book. So just as a digital author, we were sort of producing books every 6 months or so. So the next book would be summer, but then the next book would be Christmas, and the next book would be summer. And then it just sort of took off. Like this last road. And after a while, I'm just like, okay, summer, Christmas. That's what I'm doing every time.
Right.
And only recently, as I've gotten more streamlined with the process, have I eked out a couple of other books that are not, but they're extra. I still do my Christmas and my summer, and then I might do a fall book or a spring book. And just kind of pop one out here and there.
Sort of happened that way. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, after reading the Noel Bridge, what is another holiday romance from your catalog that you think readers should put on their TBRs to read this holiday season?
We have a nice little array of holiday novels this season. We're a baby publishing company, so we are starting small and building out. So we have 5 titles. New York Times bestseller Terry Wilson has 2 that were Hallmark publishing backlist titles that we acquired and have given new life to. They have new covers in there. Super cute. One is Once Upon a Royal Christmas, and the other one is Christmas Charms. And then we have Lindsay Gibson's novel, The Christmas Coin, which her novels are kind of similar to mine. If you like, especially my early work, it's very similar to mine. Hers are set mostly in New England, which is just a lovely little cozy spot to read a novel. And then I can't release too much yet, but tomorrow on our social media, we are announcing our 5th title. So that's happening tomorrow. I can't wait.
Nice. Oh my gosh, so many fun things. So you had just mentioned previously, like in addition to the holiday romances, that I know you for like summer romance. So now I understand why, given the 6-month schedule. Because I was going to say, oh, she must just love holiday in the summer, because there's just something about falling in love during the summertime. But which of your summer romance books would you recommend a reader dive into first from your work?
My big bestseller was The Magic of Sea Glass. That one was actually in Walmart this season.
Oh, nice.
Summer. That's my most popular one at the moment. And it's funny because I've only written 2, I think. The Noel Bridge, and then the Magic of Sea Glass was also She Lost Her Fiance, which is interesting because I didn't even plan that, but it just happened that the 2 books we're talking about are the 2 that I did that with. But that one is, I think the best review I ever got was someone who said, I'd been through all kinds of grief counseling and nothing helped me as much as this book did.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, because I haven't lost my fiance. I'm married to my husband and haven't had to deal with that. So that really sort of hung on to that review.
Yeah.
But that one is also about grief, but again, full of hope and it also has my dog, the UPS guy is out front. So she has a panic. And she learned that they bring her the bark boxes or whatever they are. She freaks out when they come. Sorry for that.
I don't even hear it. It's all totally fine. Yeah.
But yes, The Magic of Sea Glass has a little mystery as well, and revolving around sea glass. So, but totally different story for the Noel Bridge. It's nothing like it. But she loses her fiance. She's a wedding planner in New York, a big fancy wedding planner. She has her own company, and she can't manage planning weddings because she lost her fiance. And so she sells the business. And her fiance used to always say, why don't we just sell everything and move to the beach? We'll live in a shack on bicycles, And she was always like, whatever, we can't do that. I have this company. So she sells the company and decides to do what he wanted her to do. And in doing that, she sort of goes on a massive journey. And I won't share what happens at the end, but there's a purpose to it.
Oh, I love that.
Oh,
Oh
sure.
my
It's pretty
gosh.
great.
All right, so we're going to start with those two books for sure. But for people who aren't necessarily familiar with your work, how would you sort of describe your, romance books to readers, and who's going to really love Jenny Hale and just devour your whole catalog?
Oh, I think my books they're Southern fiction, many of them, partly because you could probably tell by the accent, but I was born and raised in Southern Virginia, outside Richmond. I moved to Nashville about probably 8 years now ago. And so they're set within somewhere around the Outer Banks, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee. So we've got a lot of anywhere from Virginia to Florida. That's where they're set. They're all full of hope, very heartwarming. The goal is to make people think with my fiction. I want them to look internally at whatever it is they're dealing with and see if they can find the silver lining to whatever it is they're dealing with. And they're usually, I would say almost always, multi-generational, because I think that you can learn so much from the elders in your family, people who have been through it. And I love writing them. They're so much fun. So we have all the way from the innocence of children to the completely wise knowledge of someone who's been around for a while.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And that makes it super special then too, having that aspect to them. Cool. Well, I mentioned earlier in the beginning that in addition to author, wife, mom, overall superhuman, it sounds like you already started and run your own publishing house, Harpeth Road Press. So take us to the beginning. Like, how did that come to be? And why did you decide to get into that angle of the romance genre world?
Well, it's really interesting. So my grandfather was a director of marketing and my grandmother was an artist. And I think the two genetics just wreaked havoc. But I'm a creative first. It just happened that I wrote a novel. I was just bored. I just wrote this novel and then thought, well, what do I do with it? And I wasn't great at it, but I learned how to do it. But I'm like that with sort of everything. I like to take photographs. I do lots of graphic design. I paint a little bit. I read poetry. I do all kinds of other things. And it just happened that the one thing that I said, I think I'm going to do this. And then it took off was the writing. So once I got into the writing, I kept wanting to hang out with my publishing team. I just wanted to I just wanted to know what they were doing. And so when they had packaging and titling and all these things, I didn't necessarily feel confident in those realms at that time, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to know so that I could become confident and proficient in it. And of course, your publisher, that's their job is to publish, right? And then I'm supposed to write, but I just wanted to know, it was driving me crazy. So finally, around 2020, I decided to write my own novel, not contracted with anyone, and just see if I know how to do it. And once I gave myself permission to do it and to not second guess anything about my creativity, it went bananas.
Wow.
And the next thing I know, I'm taking all these authors and I'm hiring all these people to help me. And in the throes of it. And having been an educator, I was one of the ground floor people who built our ESL program for our county, the initial ESL program. So building programs is something I have done before. So I immediately put on my educator and just dug in and started building out this program. And to this day, if I haven't hired a full-time person yet, but if I did, I could hand them a manual with everything they have to do. It's already done, printed, and made. So I sort of went in from the inside out and I did a soft launch with my books and then started pulling in more people. And now we just are so busy.
Wow.
And
So it's been worth it? I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it
Right.
sounds like worth it.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's like, oh gosh, how do you do it? But I'm like, it's the most fun thing for me. So it's not, I don't get up and think, how do you do it? I wake up with ideas in my head.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, let me run to my desk. I mean, if anything, I have to like make myself stop, to like,
Oh,
slow down a little bit. And luckily, I have a fabulous family, and my husband is super supportive. And he lets me do weird things on a Saturday, like spend 2 hours creating manuals or whatever I'm doing, and design or social media calendars or whatever training. But it's so much fun. So that's the way my creativity manifested itself
mhm.
in this business.
And it sounds like it's such a passion, not just a job, that you're just like you said, you get up and you're like, what am I going to do next? And is there one piece of it? Because I'm sure you have your hands in all the different hats that you're just found that you like, oh my gosh, this is the part that I love the best. Or,
Oh, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, definitely the big picture, company building, big picture. I do all of our social media. That's super fun. I wish I had more time to get on social media, but I have, we post at least once or twice every day. I do all the social media calendars. I make all the graphics for our social media. That's my favorite. That, if I could just sit there and do like PR all day, that would be the best. But I also love the idea of like when I'm training people, to take on different tasks for me, I really enjoy that part as well.
mhm.
I keep telling my husband, I'm like, at some point we're going to have an office with like chandeliers and shag rugs, and we're all going to have a coffee maker, and we're just going to sit around and talk about books.
It sounds incredible.
That would be heaven. I'm going to get there. I will get
Yes,
there.
yeah,
I will
I
get there.
believe it. I believe it.
Yeah. So right now it's coffee shops, but we're all together and
Oh
having
my gosh,
there.
that's awesome. So what then, at least from a writer's perspective, shopping around, what sort of sets Harpeth Road Press apart from other publishers?
I think just having, so as an educator, to back up, you know how when you're an educator, it's usually a former educator who is your principal, right? They've moved up to be the principal. And I've worked at schools where the principal was my like colleague yesterday, and then they now are the principal. And so there isn't that sort of hierarchy because it's almost like a team approach. So I take that philosophy as well. I am still an author. I still write 2 books
Mhm,
more a year.
mhm.
I'm in the weeds with edits. I get to try out all of our editors and see how they do, and that helps me to determine each personality of each author, which editor would match them well. And then I listen to the author. If the author says, "Oh, well, this was really hard for me because I like it when they do this," I'll give them an editor that does that, and then we'll try to build up their creativity because the whole purpose for Harpeth Road is the more creative I can let them be, the better they're going to write for me. So it's a very transparent, collaborative environment. And we're still very small because I'm still running it. I run it to the level of the big five, but I do it by myself. So we take only the number of authors that I know I can
Mhm.
get them that level of work and, top notch editing and everything that they need to support them. And I built an author's portal, which is a password protected portal where they can go in and they have everything that I've learned in my career. So I saved my beginning of the year, my beginning of career bio, my middle of career bio, end of career bio. I have headshots. I have all the editing directions. I have how to promote your different aspects of your different books. Like how do you promote audiobooks? How do you promote ebooks? How do you promote your paperback titles? I have just a whole slew of compartmentalized lessons for them that they can pick from if they
That's
need.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So if we have any like aspiring authors listening, what is sort of the one piece of advice you feel like you give most of your authors who come to you through Harpeth Road Press?
I don't think there's one piece for everyone because it's so specific to each person. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses.
Sure.
So it's a matter of just figuring out where they need the most support and then providing that. But I think, for a brand new author, the biggest thing would be how they present themselves in the pitch. You want to know, like when I get an author, the first thing I ever see from them is their submissions, pitch. And
Mhm.
so if it's kind of haphazard, it's not really answering the questions, they just ignored half the questions on the form, things like that. When you have so many to look at, I'm looking at someone, I'm trying to take people who I want to be a serious author who is going to take it seriously and do the work because it's not easy. And so I want to be able to know from the pitch. There's some pitches I just read and I'm like, "This is great," and then there are
Yeah.
others that I'm like, did they read? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what? I don't know. So I think that's important. And then also, I do go and look at them online. And they don't have to have a ton online, but what they do have online, what does it look like? Is it all over the place? Are they bashing someone on their feed? Things like that are very important for first impressions. So I sort of get a picture of who this person is. The very first thing I look at is whether or not I think that their book is marketable for us. Does it fit our list?
Yeah.
Is it heartwarming? Does it sound like they've got it together? And then I look at them at what I've got because my goal is to take what I can see of them online and figure out what we need to scaffold to get them where they need to be. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to build them into an author. So we need to make them look the part and
Right.
they have to be able to pivot, So I would just say how you present yourself in that pitch is important.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm curious too, because I feel like the romance genre is in like such a heyday, where everybody is just loving it and it's getting like bigger space at bookstores and all of that stuff. But maybe like on the flip side, it's getting so saturated for new authors or for everyone to get their stuff. Like, I don't know, where is that balance? Where do you find that balance, either as an author or publisher? Like, of course, it's great, but yet, how do you get your word out there? I don't know. Is that always a fine line you're trying to juggle and find your way?
Yeah, I mean, I do it. I think there's a fine line on both sides. So as an author, I've had to pivot. I feel like, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like the small town romances are just, it's saturated. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just saturated. So I write small town romances, right? So I have to think of how can I write a book that fits in my genre that would pull someone out and say, well, wait a minute, I want to know about this book, right? So, like, the Noel Bridge was actually written in the small town of Noel, Tennessee. So it's actually the Noel Bridge is kind of like the Nashville Bridge or something, if you actually think of it. But I tried to come up with a concept that was less to do with small towns and more to do with the bridge to sort of pull people out of that same, like, she loses her job, she goes to a small town, she meets Mr. Right, and they live happily ever after, right? Because there's, of this, I wrote them, right? So how do we tweak it? And that's the thing is it's always about pivoting. And the same thing is true for how I manage my publishing company. I'm not going to take a book. The first thing I'm going to ask is what's setting this apart? How can you tell the story in a way that sets it apart, that makes it less of a setting-based book and more of a family drama or romance or mystery or whatever it is you're trying to tell. So that's important. And then I try really hard. And this is partly because I have that artist side to me as well, but I don't follow trends for cover design. I don't. If you notice, it's a ton, there are a ton of gorgeous illustrated covers. And I'm not saying I wouldn't ever do an illustrated cover, but I'm not necessarily focused on it because I don't use that sort of dreaded word data to come up with my cover design. My cover design matches the story that we're selling. And I think rather than following trends, I'd prefer to set them. So we watch numbers. I mean, just watch numbers and pay attention to whether or not certain elements of a book are catching on. What do reviews say? What do they like about the book? That's what you want to focus on when you're trying to package the next one.
Yeah. And that's awesome. I would think, well, it's a total assumption that you're so as an author, into writing and you release it, that to take the time and step back and look at how did the launch go? What did people like to inform the next one? Or I would just be like, let's churn the next one out and go,
What? I mean, I will say as a publisher, as a specifically author-run publisher, that's part of what I do because I get that. I get that author son. I have authors like that are like, here's book 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Let's make sure. So I'm the one who steps back. I get with my team. We have conversations. What's working about where we're packaging this author? What isn't working? How can we move and tweak? Because again, I think the story can be the same. It's how you package that story, right? So, I mean, again, like I said, I think if you say, you know, I lost my job, I went to a small town and I met a hero, you're going to have a little something extra in there just because there are so many of those. So, but if you've got the extra thing, that also comes within the publishing. I make our authors send me a synopsis, and I will often give that synopsis to an editor and say, what more needs to be in this before they write the story? How do we build this out? You know, so that way, if they give me the small town book, we can say, wait a minute, what do you put in it before they've written it so that they have what they need to go forward.
Yes. Well, you mentioned some of the titles coming out recently for Harpeth Road Press, but is there any other titles that you want to spotlight that?
Oh gosh, I mean, we've got so many now. If you go to harpethroad.com/books, I believe it is, you'll see all of our books. And I mean, we're trying to sort of build out. We've got everything from Southern U.S. fiction to contemporary romance, some rom-coms. I have taken our first ever historical fiction, and I would love, just to throw this out there, for historical fiction, I would love that sort of Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe, that sort of glam historical fiction. I would be all over that because I think that would be right up our alley. It would still have to be heartwarming. It would need to be something that would give people hope and, you know, help them to feel that happiness. But I would love some glam historical fiction. That would be,
that sounds fabulous.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Perfect. Okay, so that's where we find more Harpeth Road Press stories. But if you have time, I would love to ask you some more questions about your work and as Jenny the reader. But is there any other information that readers should know about you or where they can find you online in your books to discover more about your work? Let us know.
Yeah. Okay, so mine, I have X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Threads, and Instagram. I am at J Hale Author. And then on Facebook, I'm Jenny Hale Author. So I should have tweaked that in the beginning. If you're a brand new author, go make them all the same. It's much easier. I didn't think about that when I started, and now it is what it is. And then Harpeth Road is same platform. It says at Harpeth, HARPETH Road, ROAD, all one word.
And there you have it, folks. I had such a great time talking with Jenny about her work, about Harpeth Road Press. And she's just a delight, a wonderful human being, and such a force when it comes to the romance genre. Be sure to check out her latest book, The Noel Bridge, as well as all of the new holiday romance books from Harpeth Road Press. They are definitely going to be books that you're going to want to snuggle up with this holiday season. But to learn even more about Jenny and her as a romance reader herself and the books that she absolutely loves in the genre, be sure to join the She Reads Romance Books book club, where you will gain instant access to my exclusive extended author interview with Jenny, as well as access to all of my past author interviews that I've had on the podcast. You can watch those in video form and learn all about popular romance authors and the books that they love. Just go to shereadsromancebooks.com/book club and join today. And thanks as always for tuning in. I really appreciate you and cannot wait to have you back on the podcast for the next episode. But until then, happy reading, because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. trust me, you don't want to miss this lift. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.